Everything Claude Vorion says, his main theme is based on the theory of ancient astronauts. If you look at the cover of the first books published by Raël, you can't help but notice how they resemble books published by Robert Laffont, with a black background and yellow print.
Fond noir, lettres jaunes, or et compagnie.
If you read Claude Vorion's books, you soon realize that they're full of plagiarisms.
L'histoire des Elohim.
And his story about the Elohims? That's a plural Hebrew word, which for some people means extraterrestrials. That explanation comes from an author named Jean Sondier, who wrote a book called The Moon Outpost of the Gods. What's interesting is that if you bring up these facts to the Raelians, they will simply tell you that other people had insights before he did, and that doesn't make him any less important. But as you dig deeper, you find plagiarism upon plagiarism. The shape of the flying saucer, for instance, obviously came directly from Adamski. The only difference was that Adamski described it and Claude Vorion drew it. The similarities go on and on. He even used the symbol of the Star of David with a swastika in the center, which he stole from Adamski as well. It was mentioned in Adamski's book, Inside Spaceships. Everything that Claude Vorion says has already been said by someone else before him. He simply puts a different spin on it and simplifies it. When you're familiar with other authors, it's more like bad science fiction than anything else. It's plagiarism pure and simple. And when I say he copied other people, I mean dates too. Not only did he steal the image of the flying saucer from Adamski, he also stole the date that the incident happened, December 13th.
Unlike France, where a climate of intolerance close to that of a witch hunt has been felt since the Solar Temple tragedy, we must resist the temptation to compare all cults or religious minority groups to extremists like the Solar Temple or Heaven's Gate. In actuality, very few of these groups are a real danger to their followers. The Raelian movement, founded by Claude Vorion, may seem troubling since it is on the fringes of society, but it is still nothing more than a cult.
People seem to have started thinking that the Raelian movement is another religion, a sect that believes in God. No. I recall that my original messages were misconstrued by the tabloids. We're anything but a sect. We don't believe in God. We believe in extraterrestrials who are beings like you and I, but much more technologically advanced than we are, creating a sort of cultural shock at the technological level. It's a bit like the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, where an empty Coke bottle lands on the ground and the bushman thinks to himself, the gods must have sent this. There are no gods, and there's no such thing as a soul. That being said, how can we possibly be qualified as a sect? I don't understand. I wish to repeat that our religion, as you call it, is not religion at all. It's science.
The secularization of religion has led to a drop in spirituality within society. It's as if science was taking the place of religion. Religion is becoming more secularized, while science is becoming more spiritual. Science leads to technological advances. That was one of the traits of the 1950s, a movement towards idealizing technology. Even today we're fixated with technology. Just look at computers. If I want to be socially accepted, I need a laptop computer and a cell phone. It's almost as if we identify ourselves with our technology. We live in a society where technology is all around us. The same thing happened to religion as well.
What we need to understand is that thanks to technology and science, the world we live in 20 years from now won't look anything like it does now. I'm telling you, it'll be totally different. People think that evolution is progressing at a constant rate, and it will take us centuries to advance. That's just not true. Why? Because of computers. That's what I explain in this book. Computers become almost twice as powerful each year. To sum it up, we've discovered more things in the past 20 years than we have in the entire history of the human race. In the next 10 years, we'll do the same thing. Then in 5 years, then in 2 years, then in less than a year, then in 6 months, then in 3 months. If we add up all those time frames, we arrive at 2020, 2025. By the time we get to that period, we'll be discovering more within 1 week than we did in the history of the human race. Then, in a day. Eventually, we will get to the point where transhumans, as I like to call them, will be able to discover major principles within the space of a minute. By 2020, 2025, we'll know everything.
Extraterrestrials are the gods who created us, just like the Bible says that God created us. We have taken the biblical model and changed the word God to extraterrestrials. And we have replaced all of the acts of God with technological know-how, laser beams, clones produced in the lab, and so forth.
Cloning is a tool mentioned in the message from the Elohims. At first, our followers were a bit hesitant to talk about the connection between the Bible and extraterrestrials, but when it comes to science, young people get very excited. There's a big difference between the old academic scientists who are against anything new, which is normal since they're old and tired, the dinosaurs of science, and today's youth, who flock to us by the thousands, full of enthusiasm. We stated our mission from the outset 27 years ago. We're in favor of technological advances. That's why I wrote this book, Yes to Human Cloning. We're not just in favor of cloning, we're also in favor of genetic engineering. We're in favor of genetically altering plants. If you give me a choice between 2 boxes of strawberries, one of which is grown normally and the other genetically altered, I would immediately pick the box that was genetically altered. They contain far less pesticides, and even though they have modified genes, the digestive system can still break them down. They pose no threat to the human body. So-called normal plants are huge polluters. They are the reason why pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides are sprayed into nature. With genetically altered products, we are actually protecting the environment. Condemning anything that is new and modern is considered to be politically correct, but it's a false promotion of green products. We support anything that is new, without exception. Play games that are worth playing. Go ahead and play. Change your sources of pleasure. Find something new to excite you. Come and play in the game of life where we can play together. 20 years from now, there'll be thousands of cloned children in perfect health. Just watch. 20 years from now, even if I'm not around anymore, you'll meet with my successors. And everyone will say, I can't believe how they criticized Rael back then.
Once the news was out that they had cloned Dolly the sheep, Rael was quick to announce that he was setting up the first company to clone humans. A few years later, I don't know whether or not you read his book, Yes to Human Cloning, but in it he explains that he made that statement for the publicity. Basically, in the beginning, Clonaid was just a publicity stunt. I call that an empty shell. All those years that it was nothing more than an empty shell, he would tell people that they were doing something. They were going to clone a human. It would be soon, within a year. Then he announced that he was building a lab and they were working on the clone. The owner of the lab, Mark Hunt, who wished to remain anonymous since he was an American lawyer and politician, wanted to clone his child, who had died at an early age. He had asked the Raelians to do one thing: to verify whether his child's DNA could be used to create a clone. They couldn't even do that much, he said in the Charleston Gazette. It cost them the equivalent of $250,000.
Cette affaire a englouti l'équivalent de $250,000.
We're now asking parents to pay $200,000 to have their child cloned. After all, we're not talking about the price of a condom here.
As I told you earlier, Roland Chevalier publicly admitted that Rael had confessed to inventing everything. His daughter discovered the same thing. She got upset at her father, and as a result, she was excluded from the Raelian movement, excommunicated, as it were, and her cellular plan was cancelled. Your cellular plan is what allows you to be cloned on the Elohim's planet. The Raelians don't believe that we have a soul. Without a cellular plan, you can't come back to life. You're dead forever. So here, his own daughter was excluded from the Raelian movement, and her cellular plan was cancelled. Why? What I heard from ex-members is that she went around saying that her father was making up lies. Her name is Aurore Vorillon.
Other than the family problems caused by his speeches, Rael has been free to spread his teachings throughout Quebec. Perceived as amusing by the majority of the population, Raelian theories are for the most part harmless, according to experts.
If we look at these groups as a whole, we see that their emergence reflects changes in our society, especially in the area of religion.
The
Raelian movement reflects changes that have taken place in Europe and North America, especially with regards to the Catholic Church. I think that these new religions, and the Raelian movement in particular, are symptomatic of these changes in our society. What are the main characteristics of our society? Freedom and democracy. I think that the creation of these groups is actually a very positive sign. It means that we live in a society where we allow the creation of new concepts, even if they may at times seem bizarre. Taken from this angle, I don't think that we should see a danger in them. They're a sign that democracy is working. What worries me is when a group puts someone up on a pedestal, and that person starts losing sight of reality. From their pedestal, the person may start believing that anything is possible. They could say pretty much anything they wanted to, and people would believe them. I've read some of his material, and I thought to myself, this can't be possible. He goes on and on. It's like a joke. He's just rambling on. He's got to be aware that he's just spouting nonsense. It's as if he's testing his followers, pushing them to their limits. The problem is that they don't seem to have a limit. As time goes on, it just gets worse. What do I see as the danger when someone is that high up, always on a pedestal? They lose their sense of perspective. They can even end up believing all of the nonsense that they originally made up. We saw that happen with the Church of Scientology and its leader, Ron Hubbard, who upon his death had come to believe all of the tales he had told his followers. That's the danger.
On October 6, 1994, a story hit the newspapers and television networks. An unexpected and horrific event had just taken place in Morin Heights, Quebec. Police found the remains of 2 bodies in a burnt house, apparent victims of suicide. A few hours later, it was announced that 3 more bodies had been found. All of the victims had been members of a sect, the Order of the Solar Temple. And it seemed that some of the victims had not committed suicide. They had been killed in cold blood. While the population of Quebec was still reeling over this tragedy, another news story broke out even wilder, that struck horror in the hearts of Europeans. In Chéry and Grand Chaux-Servan, police officers had just found the bodies of 48 victims, also members of the Order of the Solar Temple, in the smoking remnants of 2 burnt homes. In total, there were 53 deaths, including several children. Journalists and police officers in Quebec and Switzerland sought a reason why the members of this sect would have done such a thing, and they discovered the disturbing teachings of the Solar Temple. The names of the 2 main leaders were released to the public: Joe DiMambro, the high priest of the temple, and Luc Jouret, a man who used his charisma to attract new members. François Bourbeau, the director of UFO Alert Quebec, remembers the first time that he met Luc Jouret.
When did I meet Luc Jouret? It was in 1985, during his first visit to Quebec. He gave me a brief interview about 20 minutes long. I saw him again in the fall of 1989 when I introduced him at a 3-hour-long conference in Quebec City. That was when I saw the real Luc Jouret. His hair was longer and he was a bit of a playboy. He looked at the women a lot, and he changed his story somewhat. He didn't talk about extraterrestrials in public. He spoke about them with me later in private. But I learned that there was a dark side to his story. A few of my colleagues who were working on a story for the magazine Alter Ego discovered that Luc Jouret had a project underway with a large investment corporation in Toronto, Clarkson Gordon to be exact, an accounting firm. To build a hotel in Shawinigan worth $13 million, with a circular runway for flying saucers to land on.